A cold-hearted millionaire buries the only person he ever loved. At the funeral, two identical little girls watch from a distance. What he discovers about them will shatter his world forever. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to discover that your entire life was built on a foundation of lies? That the person you loved most kept a secret that could have changed everything? Today's story will take you on an emotional journey of a man who built walls around his heart, only to have them come crashing down when he least expected it. Alexander Reed was a self-made millionaire who believed love should come with boundaries. His wife, Katherine, accepted those boundaries, or so he thought. After her death, he discovers a truth that will force him to question everything he once believed about love, family, and what truly matters in life. By the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the most painful discoveries can lead to the most beautiful transformations. Stay with me until the end, because the lessons Alexander learns might just change how you think about your own choices. Alexander Reed had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. At 35, he had built Reed Technologies from the ground up, turning an idea sketched on a napkin into a billion-dollar empire. His office overlooked Manhattan, his garage housed cars most people only dreamed about, and his calendar was filled with meetings with the world's most influential people. But Alexander's success came with a carefully constructed framework. He believed in control, in defining exactly what he would and wouldn't allow into his life. He met Katherine Williams at a charity gala 7 years ago, brilliant, beautiful, and equally ambitious as the head of a non-profit organization. She was the exception to his no-commitment rule, the one person who seemed to understand his boundaries. Their courtship was swift, their wedding intimate. Alexander made one thing crystal clear from the beginning: there would be no children. He had watched his own father sacrifice dreams to support a family, only to die young from stress and exhaustion. "I won't repeat that pattern," he told Katherine on their third date. "I can offer you everything except fatherhood." Katherine had smiled that day, squeezed his hand, and said the words that sealed their agreement. "I choose you, Alexander. Just you." They built what he considered a perfect life, two successful individuals sharing experiences, traveling the world, supporting each other's ambitions, but maintaining the independence he craved. No messy emotions, no diaper changes, no sacrificed careers. Alexander had convinced himself that Katherine was genuinely content with their arrangement. She never pushed back, never accidentally forgot her birth control, never left baby magazines around their penthouse apartment. When friends had children, she would visit, bring extravagant gifts, then return home without a hint of longing. Or so he thought. The truth was, Alexander saw only what he wanted to see. He missed the way Katherine's smile didn't quite reach her eyes when they visited her sister's growing family. He didn't notice how she lingered in children's boutiques when they traveled to Paris or Rome. He never questioned why she insisted on maintaining a separate bank account. "For my personal projects," she'd explained. When Katherine was diagnosed with ovarian cancer 3 years into their marriage, Alexander's perfectly controlled world began to crack. He threw money at the problem: the best doctors, experimental treatments, a private nurse. But for the first time in his adult life, Alexander faced an opponent he couldn't negotiate with or overpower. The day the doctor said there was nothing more they could do, Alexander locked himself in his office and smashed a $30,000 vase against the wall. Not because of the money he'd spent on treatments, but because for all his wealth and connections, he was utterly powerless. Katherine faced her diagnosis with a strange calm that Alexander couldn't understand. "Promise me something," Katherine had whispered one night, when the pain medication made her honest, in a way their relationship rarely allowed. "Promise me you'll keep your heart open after I'm gone." Alexander had nodded, not understanding the weight behind her request. "Of course," he'd said, kissing her forehead, but inside he was already planning to seal his heart even tighter. Katherine had been his one exception, and he wouldn't make that mistake again. In Katherine's final months, Alexander threw himself into work more than ever. He told himself it was to distract from the pain, to ensure their company wouldn't suffer during his personal crisis. The truth was far simpler. He was afraid. Afraid to watch the woman he loved diminish day by day. Afraid to confront emotions he'd spent his life avoiding. While Katherine underwent treatments, Alexander attended board meetings. While she slept fitfully in hospital rooms, he closed deals in conference rooms. He hired the best hospice nurses money could buy and convinced himself that his frequent absences were what Katherine wanted. Normalcy, not constant reminders of her condition. The night Katherine died, Alexander was 30 minutes away, wrapping up an emergency meeting with investors. Her nurse called 4 times before he answered. He arrived at their home 17 minutes after Katherine had taken her last breath. The nurse, tears streaming down her face, told him Katherine had asked for him repeatedly in her final hour. Standing there in their bedroom, looking at Katherine's still form, Alexander felt something inside him harden. Not just grief, but a cold certainty that he had been right all along. Loving deeply meant losing devastatingly. He'd opened his heart once, and this was the result. Never again. At the funeral, Alexander stood stoic and alone, accepting condolences with handshakes as firm and impersonal as business deals. His eulogy was brief, eloquent, and revealed nothing of the turmoil churning inside him. It was only as he was turning to leave that he noticed them, 2 identical little girls, about 4 years old, standing beside a woman near the back of the church. Alexander dismissed the sight of the twins immediately. Probably relatives of Katherine's he hadn't met, or children of her charity colleagues. Katherine had always been better at maintaining personal connections than he was. Still, something about their solemn little faces, their matching blue dresses, gnawed at the edges of his mind. 3 days after the funeral, Alexander returned to work with a vengeance. His assistant had cleared his schedule for 2 weeks, but he overrode her concerns. "The best therapy is productivity," he told her, ignoring the worry in her eyes. He worked 16-hour days, fell asleep at his desk more often than in his bed, and declined all social invitations. When his mother called to check on him, Alexander assured her he was handling it. When Katherine's sister Emily invited him to dinner, he claimed pressing business matters. He donated a substantial sum to Katherine's favorite charity, with specific instructions. No ceremony, no plaque, no public acknowledgement. At night, in the emptiness of their penthouse, Alexander poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and stared out at the city lights. He didn't cry. He told himself that Katherine would appreciate his resilience, his refusal to crumble. In reality, he was running, from grief, from regret, from the hollow space she'd left behind. 2 weeks after the funeral, on a Sunday morning when the weight of the empty apartment became unbearable, Alexander found himself driving to the cemetery. He hadn't planned to visit. What was the point of talking to a headstone? But something pulled him there, a compass needle seeking north. The cemetery was quiet, morning mist still clinging to the grass between gravestones. Alexander carried no flowers, no tokens, just his grief, carefully contained, like hazardous material that might leak if not properly sealed. He found Katherine's grave easily, a simple yet elegant black marble headstone. Katherine Williams Reed, beloved wife, her dates of birth and death marking a life too short. Alexander stood there awkwardly, hands in the pockets of his tailored coat, unsure what to do or say. In business, he always knew the next move. Here, he was lost. As he was about to turn and leave, movement caught his eye. Across the cemetery, near a cluster of oak trees, stood a woman and two small children, the same twins from the funeral. They were placing flowers on another grave, the girls taking turns arranging the blooms. Something about their careful movements, the serious expressions on their small faces, made Alexander's chest tighten. Before he could look away, one of the girls looked up and met his gaze. The connection lasted only seconds, but it sent a jolt through him like an electrical current. For days afterward, Alexander couldn't shake the image of those little girls at the cemetery. During meetings, he would suddenly recall the solemn way they had arranged flowers on the grave. At night, he dreamed of small hands reaching for his, only to wake clutching at empty air. He told himself it was just grief manifesting in strange ways. A week later, Alexander found himself driving to the cemetery again. He parked in the same spot, walked the same path, and stood before Katherine's grave with the same awkward uncertainty. This time, he'd brought a single white rose, Katherine's favorite. As he placed it against the headstone, he heard children's voices nearby. The woman was there again with the twins, this time at Katherine's grave, several hundred feet away. Alexander froze, then stepped behind a large monument, watching as the little girls placed crude handmade cards against Katherine's headstone. The woman knelt between them, arm around each child, lips moving in what appeared to be a prayer or quiet story. Alexander felt like an intruder in a sacred moment he wasn't meant to witness. He slipped away before they could notice him, but the questions multiplying in his mind wouldn't let him rest. Who were these children? Why were they visiting Katherine's grave? What connection did they have to his wife that he didn't know about? That evening, Alexander did something he'd been avoiding. He entered Katherine's home office. The room remained exactly as she'd left it, her sweater still draped over the chair, her favorite tea mug still on the desk. With hands that trembled slightly, he began searching through her papers, her computer, her filing cabinet, looking for anything that might explain the mystery of the twins. Hours passed as Alexander methodically worked through Katherine's belongings. Most of what he found was familiar: charity reports, personal correspondence, medical records. But in the back of her filing cabinet, locked in a small box for which he had to find the key, Alexander discovered a folder labeled simply M and L. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, pictures of the twin girls from their birth through what appeared to be recent months. Hospital bracelets with the names Madison and Lily written in Katherine's elegant handwriting, birthday cards signed, "With all my love, your guardian angel," and most devastatingly, a DNA test confirming maternity. Alexander's legs gave out. He sank to the floor of Katherine's office, documents scattered around him like fallen leaves, the truth hitting him with physical force. These weren't just some children Katherine had helped through her charity work. These were her daughters, their daughters, children she had somehow carried, given birth to, and maintained a relationship with, all without his knowledge. But how? When? His mind raced through their marriage timeline. Katherine had taken a 3-month sabbatical to work on a special project overseas early in their marriage. She'd gained some weight that year, but lost it shortly after returning. Alexander had been busy with a major acquisition, flying between New York, Tokyo, and London. He'd barely noticed her absence. With shaking hands, Alexander found another document, a letter from Katherine to someone named Claire Bennett, arranging a trust fund for the girls' care and education. The most recent bank statement showed regular monthly payments from Katherine's personal account to Claire's, payments that had increased substantially after Katherine's diagnosis. The final piece of the puzzle was a sealed envelope with Alexander's name on it, in Katherine's handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just weeks before her death. "My dearest Alexander, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've discovered the truth I never had the courage to tell you. Madison and Lily are our daughters. I found out I was pregnant shortly after we married. I knew how you felt about children, about family. I knew it would mean the end of us. I made a choice, a selfish one perhaps. I wanted both, you and our children. So I hid my pregnancy, gave birth in secret, and arranged for Claire, my college roommate, to raise them. But I couldn't bear to stay completely away. I've been in their lives as Aunt Katherine, seeing them monthly, loving them from a distance. I don't expect forgiveness. I know I betrayed your trust in the most fundamental way. But I need you to know they are beautiful, brilliant, and kind. They have your determination and my curiosity. They are the best of both of us. They know nothing about you. Claire has been their mother in every way that matters, but they are yours, Alexander. What you do with this truth is your choice. Just as you gave me the choice years ago, I now give it to you, though much too late. With love, despite everything. Katherine. Alexander read the letter 3 times, then placed it carefully on the desk. He walked to the bar in his living room, poured a full glass of scotch, and drank it in one long swallow. Then he threw the crystal tumbler against the wall with such force that it shattered into countless glittering shards, much like the life he thought he knew. For 3 days, Alexander didn't leave his apartment. He didn't answer calls, didn't check emails. He moved between rooms like a ghost, the letter and photos his constant companions. Again and again, he studied the girls' faces, looking for himself in their features. Madison had his serious brow, Lily his determined chin. Both had Katherine's gentle eyes. On the morning of the 4th day, his doorbell rang. Alexander ignored it, but whoever was there was persistent. Finally, he wrenched open the door to find Emily, Katherine's sister, standing in the hallway with a determined expression. "You missed our lunch," she said, pushing past him into the apartment. "You look terrible." Alexander hadn't remembered they had plans. He followed her to the kitchen, where she began making coffee without asking permission. It was so like Katherine that it made his chest ache. "You know," he said flatly. It wasn't a question. Emily paused, her back to him. "Yes," she finally admitted. "I've known since the beginning." "Who else knew?" Alexander's voice was dangerously calm. "Mom. Dad before he passed. Claire, obviously." Emily turned to face him. "Katherine made us all promise. She said it was her choice to make, not ours." The betrayal cut deeper with each name, an entire network of people keeping this secret from him. Years of holidays, dinners, conversations where everyone knew but him. Alexander's hands curled into fists. "She had no right," he said through clenched teeth. "No, she didn't," Emily agreed, surprising him. "What she did was wrong, Alexander, but so was what you did." "What I did?" Alexander's voice rose. "I was honest from the beginning. I told her I didn't want children." "And she believed you would choose your philosophy over her," Emily said quietly. "She believed you would leave her if you knew she was pregnant. Would you have?" The question hung in the air between them. Alexander wanted to say no immediately, but honesty compelled him to pause. "I don't know," he finally admitted, "but she never gave me the chance to choose." Emily nodded, pouring 2 cups of coffee. "That's fair. She was wrong to decide for you. But Alexander, you were wrong too." "How?" he demanded. "Katherine was dying for 14 months, Emily said bluntly. "For 14 months she carried this secret, wanting to tell you every day. Do you know why she didn't, even at the end?" Alexander shook his head. "Because you weren't there." Emily's words landed like slaps. "You were at meetings, at conferences, working late. When you were home, you were distant, already pulling away. She tried to tell you 3 different times in her final week. Each time, you got an urgent call or had to check something critical." Alexander sank into a chair, remembering those final days. Had Katherine tried to tell him? Had he really been so unavailable? The girls visit her grave every Sunday, Emily continued softly. They don't understand she was their mother, but they know she was someone special who loved them very much. Claire brings them. She's a good woman, Alexander. A single mother who took in twins as a favor to her best friend, knowing she'd always have to share them with Katherine. Alexander stared into his coffee. What am I supposed to do with this information? They have a life, a mother. They don't know me. Emily reached across the table and placed her hand over his. A gesture so like Katherine's that Alexander nearly pulled away. You have choices, she said. You can pretend you never found out, return to your life exactly as it was before. Or you can meet them, not as their father necessarily, but as someone who loved their Aunt Katherine. The rest, well, that's up to you. As Emily left, she placed a card on the counter. Claire's number. She's expecting your call, if you choose to make it. The card sat untouched on Alexander's counter for days. He returned to work, mechanically going through the motions of meetings and decisions, but his mind was elsewhere. At night, he found himself looking at the photos of Madison and Lily, tracing their features with his fingertip, wondering about their voices, their personalities, their dreams. One evening, Alexander pulled out home videos of Katherine, silly moments they'd recorded over the years. In one, they were on vacation in Santorini. Katherine was laughing at something off-camera, her hair blowing in the wind. "Tell me a secret," Alexander's voice said from behind the camera. Katherine's smile turned mischievous. "If I told you, it wouldn't be a secret anymore," she teased. Had she already been pregnant then? Was that the secret dancing behind her eyes? Alexander paused the video on Katherine's smiling face. For the first time since her death, he allowed himself to really look at her, not as his wife, not as a cancer patient, but as a complete person with desires and fears he had never fully understood. The next morning, Alexander found himself driving to the cemetery again. It was Sunday. He parked far from Katherine's grave and waited. Shortly before noon, a modest sedan pulled up, and out stepped the woman, Claire, and the twins. Alexander watched from a distance as the girls placed fresh flowers on the grave, as they seemed to chat with the headstone. Something broke open inside him, a dam he'd constructed long ago, before Katherine, before success, before adulthood. Suddenly, he was 8 years old again, watching his father's coffin lowered into the ground, his mother's hand tight around his. "We have to be strong now," she told him. "We only have each other." That day, young Alexander had made a vow to never need anyone so much that losing them would destroy him, to never create a life that depended on him, the way he had depended on his father. He'd built his entire adult identity around that childhood promise. As he watched Madison and Lily at Katherine's grave, children who existed despite his carefully constructed barriers, Alexander realized with stunning clarity he hadn't protected himself from pain. He'd only ensured he would face it alone. With shaking hands, Alexander pulled out his phone and the card Emily had given him. Before he could talk himself out of it, he dialed Claire's number. "Hello?" A woman's voice, warm but cautious. "This is Alexander Reed," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I think it's time we talked." Their first meeting was at a neutral location, a private room in a quiet restaurant. Claire arrived alone as they had agreed. She was younger than Alexander had expected, with kind eyes and a reserved manner. She didn't seem angry or defensive, just watchful, assessing him as carefully as he was assessing her. "Thank you for meeting me," Alexander began formally, as if this were a business negotiation rather than a conversation that would change lives. "Katherine always said you would find out eventually," Claire replied. She hoped it would be while she was still alive, but Alexander swallowed hard. "Tell me about them, please." For the next hour, Claire shared stories about Madison and Lily, how Madison was 5 minutes older and never let Lily forget it. How Lily could already read simple books, while Madison preferred building elaborate structures with blocks. How they both loved strawberry ice cream but hated strawberry jam. How they asked about Aunt Katherine every day since the funeral. "What have you told them? About me?" Alexander asked, dreading the answer. "Nothing," Claire assured him. "Katherine and I agreed long ago that any decisions about you would be hers to make. She hadn't decided yet, and then she ran out of time." Alexander nodded, relief and regret washing over him in equal measure. "I don't want to disrupt their lives," he said, "but I'd like to meet them, if you think that would be okay." Claire studied him for a long moment. "As what?" The question caught Alexander off guard. "As a friend of Katherine's, I suppose, for now." 2 days later, Alexander met Madison and Lily in a playground near their modest apartment. Claire had prepared them simply, "A special friend of Aunt Katherine's wants to meet you." To Alexander's surprise, the girls approached him without hesitation. "Did you know our Aunt Katherine?" Madison asked directly, her small face serious. "I did," Alexander replied, kneeling to their level despite his expensive suit. "Very well." "She's in heaven now," Lily informed him solemnly. "But we still talk to her at the Stone Garden." "I've seen you there," Alexander admitted. "That's very kind of you to visit her." The girls nodded in unison. "We bring her flowers because she loved flowers," Madison explained. "Do you bring her flowers too?" Alexander felt a pang of shame. "Not often enough," he said honestly, "but I think I will from now on." That first meeting lasted 20 minutes. The twins showed Alexander how they could pump their legs on the swings without help, how they could climb to the top of the slide without being scared. Alexander found himself laughing genuinely for the first time in months, watching these small humans who carried his DNA but were complete mysteries to him. As weeks passed, Alexander established a routine. Every Sunday, he would meet Claire and the girls at the cemetery, bringing flowers for Katherine's grave. Afterward, they would go for ice cream or to the playground. The girls began to look forward to seeing Mr. Alex, asking Claire when he would arrive. Behind the scenes, Alexander made more significant changes. He reorganized his work schedule, delegating responsibilities he had previously insisted on handling personally. He started leaving the office by 6 most evenings, something that shocked his executive team. He bought books on child development and psychology, reading late into the night. 3 months after their first meeting, Claire invited Alexander to the twins' 5th birthday party. It was a simple affair at their apartment, with balloon animals and a homemade cake. Alexander arrived with carefully selected gifts, books for Lily, a complex building set for Madison. As he watched the girls blow out their candles together, he felt a painful mixture of joy and loss. Joy at being present for this moment, loss for all the moments he had missed. After the party, when the other children had gone home and the twins were playing with their new toys, Claire motioned Alexander to join her in the kitchen. "They ask about you when you're not here," she said quietly, loading the dishwasher. "They've started calling you Uncle Alex when they talk about you." Alexander felt a warmth spread through his chest. "Is that okay with you?" Claire nodded slowly. "It is. But Alexander, I need to know, what are your intentions here? These girls have already lost one person they loved. I can't let them get attached to someone else who might disappear." The question forced Alexander to confront what he had been avoiding for months. What did he want? What role was he seeking in these children's lives? He thought of his spacious, empty penthouse, of Sunday mornings that had once been filled with work but were now the highlight of his week, of the way Madison's brow furrowed in concentration exactly like his own. "I want to be in their lives," he said finally, "permanently, as whatever role you're comfortable with. I'm not trying to replace you, Claire. You're their mother in every way that matters, but they're part of Katherine and they're part of me. I can't walk away from that." Claire looked at him for a long moment. They're going to have questions someday about their biological parents. And when that day comes, Alexander said, meeting her gaze steadily, I hope we can answer those questions together. 1 year after Katherine's death, Alexander stood in the doorway of his home office, a room that had once been his sanctuary of work and ambition. Now it was in the middle of a transformation. The sleek desk remained, but the austere furniture had been replaced by comfortable chairs and a small couch. Bookshelves that once held business manuals now contained children's stories and educational games. On the wall hung 3 photographs in matching frames. Katherine on their wedding day, her smile radiant, Madison and Lily at their 5th birthday, faces smeared with chocolate frosting, and a new addition, Alexander with the twins at the Central Park Zoo, all 3 making silly faces at the camera. The doorbell rang, and Alexander felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. Today was significant. The first time the girls would visit his home. Claire had suggested it after months of careful observation, convinced that Alexander's commitment was genuine. They should know all the important parts of their lives, she had said. And you're becoming an important part. Alexander opened the door to find Claire and the twins, the girls bouncing with excitement. Uncle Alex, is your house really at the top of the building? Can we see all of New York? Do you have any pets? Can we get ice cream? The questions tumbled out faster than he could answer. Come in and see for yourselves, he laughed, stepping aside. As they explored the penthouse with wide eyes, Alexander realized he was seeing his home, his life, through new perspectives. The giant television that had rarely been turned on, the pristine kitchen where he never cooked. The spectacular view he had stopped noticing years ago. Later, as the girls napped on the couch after an afternoon of exploration and games, Claire joined Alexander on the balcony. They had developed an unlikely friendship, bound by their shared love for the twins and for Katherine's memory. They love it here, Claire said, watching the Manhattan skyline shimmer in the afternoon sun. Though I think they've completely rearranged your concept of interior design. Alexander smiled, thinking of the pillow fort currently occupying his living room. I think I needed some rearranging. Claire turned to face him. Alexander, there's something I need to tell you. I've been offered a job in Chicago. It's an amazing opportunity. Better pay, career advancement, everything I've worked for. Alexander felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. You're moving, taking the girls to Chicago. The thought of Sunday mornings without Madison and Lily, of holidays without their excited voices, left him hollow. That depends, Claire said carefully, on what we decide together. Together? Alexander repeated, not understanding. Claire nodded. The girls need stability. They need both of us now. I don't want to separate them from you, but this opportunity... Alexander's mind raced. Chicago was a 2-hour flight. He could commute weekends, or open a branch office there, or... What if you didn't have to choose? He found himself saying. What if Reed Technologies opened a Chicago office and I split my time between both cities? What if we found houses near each other so the girls could have both of us in their lives consistently? Claire looked startled. You would do that? Restructure your entire company? Alexander thought about the man he had been a year ago, rigid, isolated, afraid of attachment. He thought about Katherine's letter. What you do with this truth is your choice. He thought about Madison's serious questions and Lily's infectious laugh, about the way they had carved out space in his heart without even trying. For them, he said softly, yes, I would. That night, after Claire and the twins had gone home, Alexander sat in his transformed office. On his desk lay legal documents he'd had his attorneys prepare months ago, but hadn't found the right moment to discuss. Provisions for the twins in his will, a trust fund separate from the one Katherine had established, and, most significantly, adoption papers that would legally recognize him as their father with shared custody with Claire. He hadn't yet found the courage to bring these up with Claire. The arrangement they had was working, delicate as it was. But Chicago changed everything. If they were going to build this unusual family across 2 cities, they needed a foundation stronger than informal Sunday visits. Alexander ran his finger over the adoption papers, thinking of his own father, a man who had worked himself to death trying to provide for his family. For years, Alexander had seen only the sacrifice, the loss. Now he understood something else, the choice. His father had chosen family over ambition, connection over security. It wasn't a failure. It was the most fundamental kind of success. Tomorrow he would talk to Claire about these papers, about Chicago, about becoming officially and legally what biology had already made him, a father. The thought still terrified him. But for the first time in his life, Alexander was choosing to walk toward his fear instead of away from it. On his desk, next to the legal documents, sat a small handmade card Madison had given him that afternoon. In wobbly letters it read, "Uncle Alex, I'm glad you were Aunt Katherine's friend. Now you're our friend too. Love, Madison." Beside her name, she had drawn 3 stick figures holding hands, the tallest one wearing what appeared to be a tie. Alexander picked up the card, smiling through sudden tears. Perhaps it wasn't too late after all, to keep the promise he had made to Katherine in her final days, to keep his heart open after she was gone. Alexander Reed began his journey as a man who believed that avoiding attachment meant avoiding pain. What he discovered through Madison and Lily was precisely the opposite, that the connections we fear most are often the ones that save us from ourselves. Katherine's secret wasn't just about the twins, it was about the man she knew Alexander could become if given the chance. Sometimes life gives us second chances disguised as impossible choices. Alexander could have remained the successful but lonely man he had carefully crafted himself to be. Instead, he chose the messier, more complicated path of opening his heart to 2 little girls who never knew they were waiting for him. As for Claire, she found in Alexander not a threat to her role as the twins' mother, but a partner in creating something new, a family built on choice rather than obligation. Their arrangement wasn't conventional, but it gave Madison and Lily the stability and love they deserved. We all face moments when we must decide whether to cling to our carefully constructed walls or tear them down for something greater than ourselves. Alexander's story reminds us that it's never too late to choose love over fear, connection over isolation. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of redemption and transformation. The link to another powerful story about second chances is in the card above. Remember, the families we create through love are sometimes stronger than the ones we're born into. And it's never too late to become the person someone needs you to be, especially when that someone might be yourself. And if stories like this touch your heart, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell us in the comments, has someone ever changed your life?